It's welcome everyone to the Friday, September 26, 2025 Tumwater City Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So we will do, I see everyone is here except for Councilmember Swarthout. I do not see that she has joined us yet. So I will announce when she does. So with that, I will turn it over, is anyone willing to make a motion to approve the minutes from the Budget Finance Committee meeting from August 22nd?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Althauser, second by Councilmember Agabi. Any discussion on the motion? I see that Councilman Swarthout joined us. We are approving the minutes from the last meeting. So with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All right. We have approved the minutes from the August 22nd meeting. Now I will turn it over to, I believe, is it Matt? Are you doing it, or Troy is going to be doing this next one, correct?
Are we talking about the ERP update?
Yeah, the year-to-date budget update.
The year-to-date.
Did you say year-to-date budget report?
Yeah.
Okay, that would
That's
be
Troy. Yep.
Yeah, I figured that was correct. So, all right, so go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, council members. I'll share my screen here. Okay. All right. So as you know, we just met a week and a half ago and had a quarterly budget update for the entire council. So this one will be a little bit shorter. I did update some numbers because some things have changed, but not drastically. So we'll jump into some numbers here. I left off the property tax and sales tax because those have not changed. We also haven't got any of the state shared revenues in for the month yet. Those will probably be in Monday or Tuesday next week. So the revenue is going to look a little short, but B&O tax we did get a little bit more in and we did with utility tax. We got some more Medic One money, and then building permits. As you may recall, I think they were 97% budget to actual. Now it's up over 100%, 112%. So it's those just continue to roll in. Not too much has changed on this page, but I wanted to still provide this because it's got the bottom numbers. So I adjusted that year-to-date percentage to 75. That represents through the end of September. Obviously, we still have a few days to go. And again, all the state revenues and sales tax still to come in. So that number will definitely go up. On the expenditure side, that's where we saw the most change. The last presentation was through the end of August, so this captures most of September, although it did not capture the payroll from yesterday. So this will come up. I expect about 2.8% on the expenditure side. This is general fund. Like before, all the general fund departments are under budget year to date. If we raise this total percentage spent year to date by approximately 3% to account for this last payroll, we're still about 10% below on the expenditures. So doing well there. Utilities, not too much has changed here. This is the same way I showed them at the last Budget and Finance Committee, as well as the meeting a week and a half ago. So I'm not going to spend much time on these. I'll just kind of scroll through them. But we did get in a little more revenue, a little more expense, and still looking all about the same here. I did want to spend a minute talking about golf. I had a little brainstorm as I was preparing for this and thought, well, I don't need to wait for the dollars to get in the system. I can just call Tyler over at the golf course because I know he's tracking that stuff every day. So I did. Added so the golf revenue both on the upper portion and the lower portion is the golf revenue as of, I guess, the 24th. So I talked to him yesterday. So they didn't have revenue for the 25th yet. So through September 24th, over 1 million in revenue. That represents 91% of their budgeted revenue for the year if we take out that general fund support and the capital projects, focusing more on the operations. And so they're doing pretty good on the revenue side. On the expenses, again, we don't have the last payroll, but they are below on the expense side of the budget also. All right. Talk about some risks in the economy. So we're doing, we're doing pretty good overall. We're keeping up pretty well with revenue. Expenses are below budget. So we're looking fine. We're also keeping a close eye on what's going on with the local and national economy. And so I'm not going to go over the same risks we went over a week and a half ago, but I did a new one that's kind of emerging is the risk of a government shutdown. And we might think at first that this doesn't affect us much here, but we'll talk about that. Because it does, or it could. So first thing to know, the government shutdown is not imminent. There's still negotiations going on. Hopefully they find a way to come to an agreement and keep the federal government going. If they don't, if there is a shutdown, some of the macro effects we could see is delays reporting key financial data. Decision makers, investors use that financial data, as you know, to make decisions about spending and what to do in their business and in the economy and all that kind of stuff. So a long-term shutdown could cause a big delay in that information, which would have even a bigger effect. This can affect financial markets and other things in the business world, like mergers and initial public offerings. So those kind of things don't hit us as hard or as quickly at the local level, but let's talk about the local level. So we do have, obviously when the federal government shuts down, they stop paying people. Some people just don't work and don't get paid. Other people are still required to work and just don't get paid until the government's going again. And so as we all know, we've got a large military population in our area. So that's a big deal. We have a lot of state agencies that are heavily reliant on federal funding. My wife works at the Department of Health, and I have some inside information that if the government shuts down, Department of Health is going to lay off 163 people. And so that's obviously a concern for us because that's people no longer employed, no longer making money, and no longer spending that money at our retail locations. In addition to that, and that's just one agency. I don't know about all the other agencies, but like I said, we do have a lot of state agencies that get federal funding and are reliant on federal funding. Of course, this also impacts some really important essential services like WIC and Head Start, SNAP, LIHEAP. So our most vulnerable folks and elderly folks sometimes rely on these, and so that's a risk too. People not being able to afford to eat and live. So as I was preparing this presentation, thinking about, because we talked about unemployment last time, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I started thinking, there's just in my mind, obviously a correlation between unemployment and the economy overall, GDP or other measures of the economy. But before I go and say something like that, and as it's fact, I wanted to check myself, and so I did. And there is a thing called Okun's Law. Arthur Okun is an American economist. I didn't look to see if he's still alive or not. But he studied this theory in the 60s and pretty much proved it to be true, and it's still used today. But this law of economics does talk about how unemployment is inversely proportional to GDP. And basically says for every 1% increase in unemployment, Gross domestic product falls by 2%. And then gross national product fall by 3%. That's just another measure of the economy. And this formula is still used today by policymakers at the Federal Reserve Bank and others when they're trying to figure out when there's problems with the economy, how do we stimulate it? How do we get more people employed? Things like that. I remember the first economics class I took in college, the professor said something really profound on the first day that's always stuck with me. And he said, economics is common sense made difficult. And I found that to be very true in that class, and of course, still true today. And we'll further demonstrate that by looking at Okun's law. This is the formula for it. Yes, much more difficult than it sounds. We're not going to go through this. I found this formula because I thought, oh, I'll either crunch some numbers, or I'll get a graph this out somehow to show you what this looks like. And the graph is way too complicated and confusing, as is this formula. So we're going to bring it back to common sense, not made difficult. So basically this law, the more people who are working, the more output they're going to have in the economy. Pretty straightforward. And fewer people working means less output. Anyway, just thought that was interesting, and this is kind of why we keep such a close eye on unemployment. One of the reasons. So one more slide on unemployment, and we'll wrap this up. As we talked about, well, I don't know if we talked about this last time. Hiring has slowed. We did talk about in the last presentation about unemployment ticking up the last few months. It went from 4.1% in June to 4.2% in July and 4.3% in August. I haven't heard the September number yet. But one of the things as I was preparing this that really stood out to me, besides so hiring has slowed. I think we've kind of seen that. And I found an article that talked about how more people are unemployed longer than they were last year and the year before that. And 25.7% of job seekers are unemployed for at least 6 months. That one really stood out to me. And that's a higher percentage than it was last year by, I think, a couple percent. With that wraps up what I've got for today. So I'll stop sharing. Oops.
Any Councilmember Alhauser?
Yeah, thanks. Troy, for the expenditures being about 10 points lower than where we expected, is that as a result of just staff vacancies that we haven't filled, like budgeting through attrition? Or is that more due to intentional underspend, or do we have like a big expense waiting in the wings in December that'll drive that up? Or what's the source of that being lower for expenditures?
I think the big thing is, because these are just the general fund departments, the biggest thing is probably just staffing. Because that does not include the capital projects. Those are in different funds. And so, yeah, this is pretty much just staff vacancies, and not really any intentional underspending, but I think a lot of us, we watch our pennies and do our best.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Salazar.
Thank you, Mayor. So we are watching the news and hearing from our other jurisdictions. With the county, first they were saying 23 million, now they're saying 35 million. The city, we see Olympia, 8 million. So when people are asking me, like, how's Tumwater doing? And so just from what's my elevator speech to let people know in the community when people are asking, how's Tumwater doing? What would you advise? What would I say to people that are keeping an eye on jurisdictions and their expenses or their situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're doing, especially compared to the other jurisdictions, we're doing really well.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of factors there. I think we've got a great retail core that's been expanding. We've got a lot of new construction going on.
Mhm.
That new construction makes a difference both in our sales tax and sooner or later in our, usually a little later, but it helps our property tax as well. So those are the two big things really helping us out.
And then like, like putting our head on or hats on for next year, it looks like, I mean, you've always played it real conservatively. We haven't been in this situation where we're typically in that kind of a situation where we find ourselves having to dig out, right? I mean, that's just my perception over the years that we don't
Yeah.
typically, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I see
Yep.
Lisa's unmuting herself here too. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Lisa and I were actually having a conversation about that
Yeah.
earlier, and I think, especially, I mean, leading up to before the pandemic, things were cruising along pretty nice.
Mhm.
And then when the pandemic hit, the city was pretty fast to implement some budget cuts. I wasn't here at the very start of the pandemic, but I understand that we asked every department to cut 10%, and some things were put on hold. And so, and that was because there was a lot of uncertainty. Like, okay, we're sending everybody to work from home. We can't go out. We can't go shopping. We can't go to restaurants or movies anymore. And what's going to happen? And logically, I think it was a very sound decision and sound thinking that probably our revenues could drop off a cliff here. We can't do these things that we usually do. So the city was really quick to react to that.
Mhm.
And then in Tumwater, we were really fortunate to we have a very stable workforce with all the state jobs and government jobs in our area, and shopping with the destination-based sales tax, and people maybe not going to the stores, but they're shopping more online, and Tumwater is still getting that online revenue due to those sales. And then there were the stimulus packages, the CARES Act and the ARPA funding, as well as some stimulus to straight to people who, I don't remember which package that came out of, but people were getting stimulus checks in the mail to spend, and so that really helped our local economy and our sales tax. And I remember seeing an article in 2021 or 2022 where most cities had experienced a decline in their sales tax, and some cities it was pretty steep. And that article mentioned, in fact, I think they even interviewed Mayor Pete at the time, because our sales tax was up when a lot of people's were, and I think we were only one of. This is from memory, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think we were only one of two cities that experienced an increase in sales tax across the state. So that was pretty remarkable, and it really helped. Like you said, we budgeted conservatively, very conservatively in years past. That kind of continued. We fared through the pandemic much better than a lot of our peers, and so that's put us in a really good position today.
Okay.
And I would add, we're getting to the point where we are going to be having similar conversations, just not in as desperate a situation, right? We do biennial budgets, and that really gives us an opportunity to, we adopted, if you recall, in last year's budget season, we had a 3 biennial budget strategy, basically. We're adopting sort of a status quo. Let's kind of keep things stable for 25, 26. During that time frame, we need to have a good strategic plan, and we're going to have a lot of conversations with council about ways to both increase revenue as well as decrease expenses, because we have this ongoing structural deficit. So what you're going to see, I think, council member, is early next year and throughout next year, as we're doing our 27-28 budget, we're going to be having similar conversations that are happening right now with our neighboring jurisdictions, evaluating various programs for their cost benefit, talking about what is an essential service, what is a discretionary service, Because at this point in time, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit more in the last agenda item, like we're going to have new and different strategies for generating revenue and controlling our expenses. So those are going to be, we're going to have the same difficult conversations. We just have the luxury of a good, stable financial position right now from which to do that.
Mhm.
That gives us the opportunity to be really thoughtful moving forward.
Thank you. A nice place to be in the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you, Troy. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, so this one I think is where Matt's gonna be at. This is a cloud contract amendment for Tyler Technologies. So go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. 1 second. Let's see if I can get my screen up here for everyone to see. You'll notice that I borrowed a lot of the formatting from Troy, so this is going to look very similar because branding. My name is Matthew Ames. I'm the IT project manager. I've been in different roles around the IT department for about 20 years, so I'm pretty familiar with ERP at the city of Tumwater. My first job with the city was installing new computers that would work with the Eden system about 20 years ago when we were onboarding Eden. So I have a lot of history around the ERP system that I'd be happy to share with you. So thank you for this opportunity. The stuff we're going to go over in this presentation is first a quick history about the ERP system, the benefits of this transition, and why the timing of the transition makes sense. So first, the ERP system and its scope covers our financial systems. It covers our payroll and human resources systems. It covers our utility billing system, including our web payments and our online or our phone system payments that allow citizens to pay by calling in through a phone service. It also covers our permits and inspection systems and our asset maintenance system. So everything from water systems to streets to fleets. So that's the scope of our ERP system as it stands today. And we, as you can see, are in the middle of transitioning from the Eden system into the Munis system in an on-prem capacity. So we have our financial system moved into the newer Tyler ERP system, and we have the human resources and payroll systems moved into the ERP system. So we're actively deploying the utility billing system, but we kind of wanted to put a pause on that. And we'll discuss why that pause occurred here in a few seconds. 2021 is when we signed our contract with Tyler. And so that's when we started transitioning from our kind of 2000s era Eden system into this more modern ERP Munis product. And so we decided at that time that on-prem was the right answer for us. Tyler, the next year, announced the Cloud First initiative, where they started to differentiate between the on-premise product and the cloud product. For the last 2 years, we have been in internal discussions about what benefits will we get when we transition to the cloud? What is the value add for that? And so the staff has been discussing this potential change for about 2 years, and we really do want to make sure there's value for the extra dollars we're spending. And we are now thoroughly convinced of that. And that's why you have a contract amendment before you today. So we discussed this in front of council during a work session last year and during the budget workshop. The budget was approved with the impacts of these costs built into it. So this isn't kind of new money we're asking for right now. This is all kind of planned within the budget process. And so the timing of this change, the first is Tyler has had 2 years to develop a different product that they have for their cloud services. And so there's additional resources and additional functionality built into that platform that we want to take advantage of. The next piece is there's a data migration component to this part of the project. And so all of our data that exists here on premise in our servers has to be moved into the cloud, and then Tumwater staff has to ensure that that information that is in the cloud is accurate and working properly. And we're trying to minimize that impact on our staff. And so if we move right now, we've only got about 2 years of data in the cloud, or that we'd have to ensure it is accurate. If we delay longer, we're going to be going through more and more data, and it's going to require more staff time to review. The second piece is, if we can move forward with this process before we have utility billing live for our utility billing customers and our permit customers, they're not going to experience the 1 to 4 day outage period of the final go live. And so when we move our data, that final transition takes about 1 to 4 days for us to give the data to Tyler, for them to bring it up in a live environment. And we don't want our utility billing customers to experience that in a public way. So we're trying to minimize that outage period for those citizens. The benefits of the cloud, I've been kind of touching on this as we've gone through the different slides, but the cloud's highly resilient. It's running on Amazon services, so we get all the benefits of Amazon running our data and hosting our services. We get the benefit of the continued development. This is now a more featureful product than the one we experience here on premise. There is a decrease in our IT infrastructure, so we're less likely to need to update our local servers. There's a decreasing cost of how much we need to spend on our internal IT structure. And Tyler is currently developing artificial intelligence tools that are supposed to be providing significant impacts to increased efficiencies for staff. And so more natural language ways to talk to our ERP system and get good information out of it. So ideally, this will lower the bar on training for any of our staff that are becoming onboarded, and they can start communicating and working with our systems in ways that they're used to with public tools. And the last slide I have here is our recommended action to place the contract amendment to support modernizing our ERP planning on the October 7th, 2025 council consent calendar, with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
Any discussion? Councilmember Swarthout and then Councilmember Alcázar.
Okay. So with this action then, so it looks like moving to the cloud, then what would be the timing, going back to the timing of bringing the other departments online? So, because it looks like we already have financial and payroll is already on the Tyler system. So when do you anticipate the other ones coming online? What
So
comes first? So,
I'm sorry.
that's right. Go ahead.
So we will switch to the cloud first.
Okay.
That process is about a 4 to 6 month period, depending on how involved it is.
Oh, okay.
We anticipate between 3 to 6 months for the last phase of utility billing. Mostly that piece of it, because that system is actually ready, but we need to be very thoughtful in how we communicate that change to the public. And so we didn't want to just jump that out. And so we're going to plan for about 3 to 6 month period for that communication strategy to roll out.
Okay.
And then permits and inspections will follow with about a 1-year implementation cycle after utility billing. And enterprise asset maintenance will be an additional year following the permits and inspections implementation.
Okay.
Great. Councilmember Alcázar, did you still have a question or a comment?
Yeah. So in terms of the amendment, can you speak a little bit about fiscal expense? And was that in our budget, or did we have to do a budget amendment in order to pay for the increased costs for cloud?
So it was planned for in the 2025-2026 budget cycle. There is an increase in cost to Tyler hosting our software for us. The annual cost is $352,866 in 2025 dollars. I believe Troy used the 2024 dollars to compare our current costs. So in your agenda item, you might have slightly different numbers, but the The contract amendment is for 352,866, which is our current costs.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Agati.
Thank you, Mayor. What is our data retention timeline?
So do I understand that what is our data retention for ERP, kind of the ERP information? Is that?
Yes, yes.
Each module, each kind of category that the system uses has different data retention policies wrapped around it. We haven't truncated any data from our current Eden system. The data we migrate into the new system varies by category. So we transferred a different amount of information for the financial systems into the Munis system than we did for the payroll system. But we still maintain access to all of that history in its original form in our Eden system. So if there are any questions or if we need to look up any information and report back, we continue to have access to all of the information in its original form in our our Eden ERP system.
So in that case, if you paid an ordinary invoice back in 2006 or 1998, would you still retain that data as historical, or we just file it in paper form?
I can't speak to the paperwork form of it, but we still have that record in our Eden ERP system. So if staff wanted to review that purchase with vendor information, how much was spent, and any descriptive information on it, they would still have access to that. They wouldn't be looking at it in our current ERP system. They would be looking at it in an archival system.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Swarthout, did you have an additional question?
I do. So in the fiscal notes, I'm trying to follow the question that Councilmember Althauser asked. So as it says, see, the annual cost of our current subscription is $182,347. The cost of the annual subscription is $334. So anyway, I just want the numbers to match up. So when it's going on consent, so just so that it's more clear about what the actual expense is. I know it sounds like we've already covered it in our budget process, but just with, because he says 350 something, and does that match up with the 334? So I'm just being the numbers person, make sure the numbers match up. So in the fiscal notes.
And there's a further asterisk on that 352,866 number. That is our annual maintenance and subscription cost for the 2025/2026 period. But we negotiated into our contract a pause on the maintenance costs, a pause on the maintenance cost for our asset maintenance system, which totals $99,836. And so the cost to the city for the 2026 period will be significantly lower than the 352,866 that we're talking about today.
So Troy, is there a way to clean up the fiscal notes so so the numbers match up? So
Yeah, we can do that
okay.
on the other
I
stuff.
just from a snapshot to be able to look at it. So I know that's a lot of language there, but I just like been able to see, because I've been asked before, like when we had an increase like on something that came up recently that we decided on, and we're like, oh, it went from 100,000 to 300,000, and I couldn't answer the question like, why did it go up? And so then so I just if we could clean that up, that'd be great. So help me answer questions. Thank you.
And of course, too, I just add, our recommendation is consent. If the committee wants to recommend going on considerations, we can certainly do that. Or any council member can pull it from consent and ask it to be on consideration. So
then the question then is the updated data that Councilmember, Councilwoman, see,
Swartha.
yeah, it's at lunchtime.
I know, it's okay. It's all right.
What I asked for. Pending that, do we then move this forward, knowing that that will be done before full council vote?
So Peter, if I can answer that question, I think the information that you have in your packet is the and Matt and Troy can jump in here. I believe the information you have in your packet is like the maximum number.
Okay.
So yeah, and we will correct and update. We're basically updating and providing more detail to the information that you have in your packet in the staff report that will go into the council packet. So yes, you can do that.
So on that note, if I don't hear any objection, I'd like to make a motion. Go ahead. Mayor, should I go ahead?
Mayor, you're muted.
So sorry about that. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Gabi.
Okay, so I motion that we place the contract amendment to support and modernize our enterprise resource plan on the October 7, 2025 City Council consent calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Gabi, second by Councilmember Althauser. Any additional comments on the motion? All right, with that, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
Those opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go to discuss baseline financial assessment. And I believe that City Administrator Parks is going to be presenting.
Yeah. So we wanted to put this on your agenda today to just have an opportunity to have a conversation about the baseline financial assessment that Morgan Shook provided to you at the council meeting. Was it just last week? Time is flying. So we just wanted to have a basic conversation. This is also on the council full council work session agenda for October 28th, and we'll have a little bit more structure to this conversation, but we wanted to talk a little bit with the Budget and Finance Committee, get a basic understanding of, did you understand the assessment? Do you have questions? Do you have thoughts, concerns? That will help Troy and I make sure that we're having a good conversation about the baseline financial assessment on October 28th. So, and the only thing I would add, sort of connecting it to the conversation that we just had, that Eileen, you brought up the question about, how are we doing compared to our colleague cities? The whole purpose of this part of the financial assessment is really for the council to have a good understanding of where things sit. Where are we right now? And what are the challenges? What are our current challenges? And given our current challenges and moving forward, needing to budget for the 27-28 biennium, what are the things that we're going to need to think about in terms of different types of strategies for meeting our community's needs with the resources that we have available? So I'm hoping that this is just a conversation today. Like, impressions, thoughts, was it confusing? Was it horrible? And Troy and I have we have some questions in the wings that we can ask specifically, but we really are just wanting more, did you understand what was presented? And it's okay if you did not fully understand it, because it's complicated stuff.
Any comments? Councilmember Althauser?
Yeah, I'll kick us off, I guess. I think one of the exercises that I didn't fully understand in the time at the time when we were going through it was the one where we looked at current service levels, optimized service levels, and I forget the terminology, but there is sort of different tiers of levels of service that we were providing to people, where you had what we're currently doing, and then you had what we're really sort of aspiring to on the opposite end. And it was confusing to me to sort of see that in the context of the part where you're really aspiring to have the really high levels of service actually didn't seem that different from the beyond the core service levels that we're doing. Yeah, this is the slide that I'm referencing, I think.
Yeah.
Like the column 2 for core and column 4 for I'm on my cell phone, so it's teeny, whatever for it, the fourth column.
Yeah.
It starts with an E, where I'm in an eye exam right now a little bit. Sort of seems like those don't have a big delta between the two. And I think my thought at the time was it would be helpful for me to sort of see, we have what we say are our core services. We're already doing less than those in our budget, but the really high level of service just seems very similar to me to the core level, to where the distinction between those isn't as valuable if core is the same as what we really want to be doing.
Right.
So the utility of this exercise, I sort of had some questions about, and I also wonder, like, at some point, if we do, I don't think we're going to, like Troy said, we're not in as dire straits. And like you said, Lisa, we're not in as dire straits as our neighboring jurisdictions, which is great. And that's, I think, speaks a lot to our diligence when it came to enacting our budget recently. But we did also enact it with, a significant usage of ending fund balance. And that sort of speaks to the shadow deficit concept. And I kind of wonder if there's also utility in having another column that would be like, this is what service would look like if we didn't use the ending fund balance to try to get there, to illustrate sort of the challenge that we're facing. Because we're in good shape, but it's because we used our savings account and we've been very diligent over the years to be in good shape. And we're not going to be able to continually do that. So I think it would also be helpful to talk about the shadow deficit in that context, in terms of what that actually looks like. Because when we look at the tools we have to try to fix it, one of those tools is revenue. And I think our residents, are at a point where there is a degree of revenue fatigue, to where we really need to make the case for, if we need new revenue, why that is the case. And part of that discussion, I think, is demonstrating the alternative, where we can show, like, all right, if we don't do this, this is what life looks like for the fire department, for the police department, for public works, for yada, 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 Parks and Rec, and all these other departments. Like, if we go down the road of eventually needing revenue, I think it's important to also illustrate the negative and not just the positive. So we illustrate how challenging it would be to try to meet that need without relying on savings, essentially.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's sort of my thoughts on it. But I thought I think this has been a very helpful exercise overall, though, in terms of visualizing things and understanding what we're facing.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Troy and I have had this same conversation. We're going to check in with Morgan and make sure that Troy and I are looking at this as we believe we are. We agree. Troy thinks one thing and I agree with him, and he's the finance director. So I'm hopeful that that's encouraging. I think in terms of the discrepancies, so the current the most dramatic discrepancy that you see right now is what we actually funded in our 2025 budget and what our department directors are saying. If we're doing everything that we are supposed to be doing and is expected of us, that's the core, that's the column, the second column in from the left, we should be here. right? So that demonstrates, we asked for 67 new employees last year. We got 33, right? So that represents that we can't do so that council members can understand when I say we don't have the staffing resources to do anything more. We don't have actually the staffing resources to do the things that we are expected to do now, which means things fall off and don't happen. We don't do capital projects. We don't apply for transportation grants right now because we don't have transportation engineering staff to help us with the project. So I think that's why you see the biggest jump in between the budget and the core. Similar to existing, right? Those two middle columns are very similar. I think the thing that will be more helpful moving forward with this tool, because the enhanced column, the column on the far right, that's just based off of the director's current knowledge, right? So as we start adding in different potential initiatives in the future that the council might add, that difference, as we know more about what the enhanced things might be, that column is going to get taller, if that makes sense, right? Because we've got a baseline, and the baseline is part of a tool that helps us understand future scenarios. So as we're plugging in future scenarios, the enhanced column on the far right is going to get bigger, right? Because we're going to be testing those things if we, in terms of trying to compare one chart to another. So I think I agree with you. It was hard to follow some of these charts when they were showing it this way. And it is difficult to try and explain why, well, if we're going to enhance our services, why let's just go all the way up there, right? But that's basically considerate of no new programs. And I think that's why, other than the differences you do see in existing to enhanced, both the police department and the fire department have strategic plans that have been very specific in identifying new FTEs that they need to do those things. So I'm guessing the difference between 69.4 and 70.9 are the staffing levels that are identified in the police strategic growth plan and in the fire district or the fire department plan. It's largely a staffing thing at this point in time. Aileen, did you have something else too?
So I'm trying to try to figure this out too. So right now, the first column is where we're living. We're in 25 budget world. Okay.
Yes.
So the core, okay, help me understand again. The core is where we want to be. Is that describe what, okay. Because we're not there, right? That's not where we are. And that's where we aim to be. And then the other ones are even more fluff later on.
None of it would be fluff at this point.
Okay. All right. Just saying. Okay. I'm throwing stuff in here. Sorry. Okay.
So when we went into our budgeting process early 2024, we said to the directors, we always give budget direction when they start their process. And the original budget direction was largely focused around people, because what I was hearing from all of the directors is we don't have enough people to do the work that the council and the community wants of us. And that was pretty uniform. So the instruction was, okay, based on what we're doing right now and what you understand we are going to need to be doing in the next year or two, based on existing policies, programs, et cetera, what do you need? And so that's where we got the request for 67 employees, right? And we couldn't afford to do that. When we first, I can't remember if we actually first showed you this budget, but the first cut at our budget, we were $30 million above our revenue. And that included like a whole bunch of deferred maintenance in our facilities and in our parks. It included a whole bunch, all those employees. And so the way to look at the $54 million column and the $68 million column is if we were fully funding everything that we are obligated and expected to do right now, it would be, our 2025 budget would be $68 million, not $54 million. And that's cumulative, that exists because we have consistently been trying to do as much as we possibly can without adding new staff and new people. This is, Troy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think close to 80% of our budget is people, right?
Probably
76.
close. Yeah, probably. Yeah, in the 70s.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, you know, when 76% of your total budget, you know, absent capital purchases, that like a $1.2 million fire truck or a
Right.
$40 million community center or a $40 million operations facility, the majority of our costs are 76%. So if we're not doing, if we can't fully fund our, with appropriate staffing levels, the things that we are being asked to provide, then it's not surprising that you see a big number difference. So I recognize that this is a challenging concept, and maybe we need to do a better job of trying to explain this. And I do think when we get to the point of talking about potential scenarios, a comparative graph would be helpful, right? Yeah.
So in my head, so when we were talking about our elevator speech and where Tumwater stands, then in reality, you know, we're $13.8 million behind, you know, that's what you're saying as far as our core services go right now, that, you know, right where we're meeting things now, we're meeting services, but if we were a part of that conversation that's happening now with our jurisdictions that are trying to make budget, then we are 13.8 million behind. So
Either,
providing
yeah.
core services.
yes, and the core services in this case, and part of what I'm coming to learn here is I think we need to get some more clear definitions around these types of services here. It's normal this 3-tiered definition that, can you see the slide? Are you seeing the core and required services slide? Okay. That's a really common budgeting tool when you're working with a consultant, right? And these are things that we as management team, as directors, have been trying to talk about our services this way as well. This is a little bit different than we had a conversation back on the 9th, I think, when we were talking about the strategic plan, where we were talking about essential services versus discretionary services. This is a little bit more, this definition that we're currently using is more refined than that. The essential versus discretionary is very black and white. And so we're going to have a better understanding of all of those definitions. And I have a note to myself that we need to be better about like giving you some examples. So for example, a core and required service. So one example would be our FD Cares program. We are not required, we are not mandated to provide FD Cares. Right? It's not a legal requirement. It's not a basic function, you know, in terms of there's not an RCW that says you shall take care of people who can't take care of themselves, right? But it is an expected service, and it's one that we've been able to figure out a way to provide in terms of partnering with the city of Olympia. So in that case, FD Cares is on the list of core and required services because it's something we've been able to figure out how to do, but it is not necessarily in the discussion about essential and discretionary services. At some point in time, we're going to have the conversation with council members about to help you understand we absolutely have to do these things. We can't not do these things. And in order to do that, this is what we need. And then the other things are going to have to be, the discretionary things are going to have to be put into these budgeting buckets that we have in terms of core services, existing commitments, and enhanced services. to be able to have the conversation about what we can afford of those different things moving forward. Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, I think, Eileen, you asked a really good question, and Lisa, thanks for mentioning definitions. And I just want to make sure that to sort of drill down, because the other neighboring jurisdictions, when they talk about how much, they're having exploratory exercises about cuts and things that they need, actions they need to take, those are in reflections of a literal deficit where they do not have enough money in their budget to pay for the things that they already do. And we're talking about, I think the term is the shadow deficit, right? Where we have aspirational goals for levels of service, and there's a delta between what we currently buy and what we would like to buy to provide by way of services. And we don't have a $13 million literal deficit. We have a $13 million aspirational shadow deficit. Is that right, that understanding?
Yes, yes. And that's one thing that Morgan pointed out in his presentation, which I appreciated. It's like there are literally many jurisdictions, especially right now, that are dealing with an actual deficit. Troy and I were talking this morning before this meeting about this meeting. And one of the things that we talked about was that the information that you see in these graphs, these are budgets, right? So let me find this one. We'll look at the fiscal cliff slides. There's two of them. So this shows more expenses than revenue on an annual basis moving forward. And that has been our trend. So the 23-24 budget assumed and planned for spending ending fund balance to balance the budget. So we were overspending our revenues in the 23-24 budget. We are overspending our revenues in the 25-26 budget. So this shows what happens if we continue that trend, right? In actuality, and for a whole bunch of reasons that Troy kind of touched on, and which are very complex, we actually, for example, we didn't overspend our revenue in 23-24, right? So our actual beginning fund balance right now is about $30 million. So that's kind of the nature of the shadow deficit, right? If we keep going the way we're going, if we keep expecting more and not fully funding it, we're going to be spending more revenue than spending more than the revenues we have available, and there will be a problem in the future. And in this slide, it was like assuming everything is nice and stable in our economy. The growth of the city is the same in this slide as it is in the next one. But the economy itself, things that are not in our control, essentially, are stable. And we are out at 2035, where we are hitting this figurative fiscal cliff. But if things outside our control, like the economy, change drastically, we could be at the figurative fiscal cliff in 2029, but those are things that are outside our control, right? So playing with this shadow deficit, it is okay, but it can be risky, right? So we need to prepare, and we need to sort of right the ship in terms of doing better work to match our expenses and our services provided to the revenue that we have available to us. And the information in this presentation from Morgan, I think just for clarification, it doesn't assume any debt service payments. And we've got a number of debt service payments that are going to come out of the general fund, not fully maybe, but a portion will come out of the general fund. We do have reserve accounts. We do have capital facilities funds. So we have other funds and other money. But in terms of our basic services I think Morgan pointed out, the general fund is where we spend our time talking about things mostly, because that's where most of the trade-offs happen. you don't have a lot of, leeway when it comes to your utility funds. Those funds are based on revenues and user fees, and they have to be used to support that enterprise fund that's in water, sewer, stormwater, and golf. You can't use those monies elsewhere unless you're loaning them and getting interest back off of it. So there's not as much flexibility to make decisions to affect, your financial health in those funds as there is in the general fund. And quite honestly, the majority of the services that the city provides, other than those, the three utilities, is coming out of the general fund. So,
Councilmember Gabi, I think he just raised his hand.
Yeah, so I want to thank Troy for showing that Okun's law. So if that is the basis upon which we will look at this shadow deficit, if we assume that in 2029 we will start to hit a cliff, so that presupposes that the economy will stay where they are today, that there is no improvement, which begs the question, if that is the case, we might as well not make any future projections. So I don't know if by 2029, 2030 that we're going to be where we're at now, because if you go back to what was happening 5 years ago, we had a similar situation, and then we have a change in the political climate, and then we were doing fine. And then we're here now. So if we put that on the continuum, I don't know if we are going to be on a cliff at all in 2030. That's what, 6 years from today? So things do change. And then the other thing is, in terms of services, assuming we have a change in our property tax, and that will bring up revenue, right? So what this graph here is good to know and good to have at the back of our mind that things could go this way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is where we are going to find ourselves. At least this is the way I look at it. Maybe Troy can maybe tell us if I'm wrong.
No, I think you are correct. This scenario and as well as the other similar graph are based on a set of assumptions. The economy can change, the political environment can change, the laws can change. If we finally, the Association of Washington Cities has been trying for years, as have the member cities, to get the property tax law changed. So if that happens, that's a game changer. So you're correct. This is just a model. Both of these are two different scenarios.
and he
Based on
froze.
some assumptions, those assumptions. And what?
You froze.
Freeze.
Oh, yes.
I think, so Troy does a really good job of tracking the economy, and that's what you're getting every month in these meetings, and we're getting quarterly at the council meetings. And he's the spreadsheet master here at the city of Tumwater, at least one of them. And so he is constantly keeping our projections up to date. So, using the projections to help us plan and be intentional about what we're doing, right? So yes, projections are going to change, and we're being very careful to make sure that we are tracking the assumptions that go into our various projections so that we can modify those assumptions as we need to, but we know, and we can always document why and how we had a projection that we had, right? So, Troy does a fantastic job of managing those projections and understanding the economy and paying attention to the economy. I have to turn it off because it's depressing to me. So he's the subject matter expert. He gets to track all the news around tariffs and government shutdowns and that kind of thing. So the other thing I wanted to say too, Peter, is one of the things that we need to do better with our community and with everybody, and this is not an easy task, and I think every jurisdiction struggles with this. We need to be better about explaining how property tax works. Because property tax is not as simple as looking at your yearly tax bill and seeing it go up 15% and saying, so the city doesn't need more than 1%. It is not that there are too many factors that go into an individual person's property tax assessment to be able to explain that in connection with how the city government property tax levy works. So we're going to be, Troy's done a good job, I think, in the past of trying to explain how that all works. That was something that we learned out of the survey. Like, our community doesn't like when if you could talk about a sales tax increase and people are saying, well, you're going to increase my rent because now the landowner is going to pass along that cost to me. It's like, well, right. So it's a sales tax, is not a property tax. So if the landowner is pointing to a sales tax increase as a reason for raising your rent because it's affecting their property taxes, that's not correct. So we need to do some better educating around property taxes and how they work. But essentially, the city is limited. If our property tax levy in 2025 is $10 million, we can only increase that by 1% for the next year. So we add that 1% on, which is, Troy, help me the math. Is that $100,000?
Yes.
Okay. So in 1 year, our property tax revenue is $10 million. By law and by cap, the property tax levy for the next year is only $10,100,000. The difference comes, and this is where we've been very, very fortunate. And this is where other jurisdictions, a lot of the jurisdictions that I worked for in Eastern Washington, didn't have this. Growth and development adds new assessed value to your tax rolls. And so that also adds to your property tax from 1 year to the next. But if you don't have that new growth and development, you don't get anything but the $100,000 that was 1% above what you levied for the first for the previous year. The other thing that gets confusing for people is that property taxes, when we levy tax, we do not, unless it's a levy lid lift or a specific tax proposal, we're passing annually a tax levy that's based on a total dollar amount. And that total dollar amount is collected for all jurisdictions, is collected by the county and based on the assessed value in our community. That's the per thousand rate. That's the levy rate. So there's a tax levy, and then there's a millage rate, like a per $1,000, a cents per thousand factor. We don't affect the factor unless we're doing a levy lid lift. The annual thing that we do is we take that aggregate dollar amount and we increase it by 1%. And I'm pretty sure I just confused.
So I think what we need is graphs and bars that shows, because there's more than just the city that goes into property tax. There's schools, there's county, there's a whole bunch of other things. And so I think if we saw it in a pie and show what small portion is actually the city of Tumwater in the property tax, I think that would make more sense for the average person, because man, people's eyes start glazing over and then they're just as lost as in the beginning.
So essentially in mathematics, what you just said is distributive properties. Okay, so if I have $10, now work with me, and I go to Costco, that's why I went to Fred Meyers. I have $10. I'm going to buy a loaf of bread for $1. And and I'm going to buy some other things for 50 cents. And then along the way, I bought another thing for 75 cents. So now let's do pure math, $2.25. That's how much I have spent thus far, right? And then I say, when I get home, I need to buy gas, a gallon of gas for $5. So now you see that $10, I kept spending it here and there, but the $10 that I have not increased. It stays the same, it decreases. For a property owner, whether you do assess value, whether you do whatever moon value, whatever that is, if I paid $10 last year and I'm paying $12 this year, it has gone up by $2. So what you're saying is, because I go to Fred Meyer's, I buy a loaf of bread, I bought eggs, I bought this, I bought that. That is distributive property factor from that $12. So now, bear in mind, last time I went there, I only had $10, right? Now I've increased it by $12, which means now I now have more spending power. So if you are going to educate a homeowner in Tumwater, say, this is why your property value is going up, don't start by saying about the using all that mathematical formula that you spit out there, because that confuses them and it doesn't tell them what they want to hear. If you tell them, if you pay $5,000 this year and you pay $6,000 this year, we only get 1% of that. The remaining percentage go to X, Y, Z. Simple. That's all they need to know. But if you're trying to be cute by saying assess value, this and that, that's expensive.
Yes, so I am not in any way trying to be cute or trying to discount the impact of private property owners. I'm not trying to do that. But it is not, honestly and respectfully, it is not that simple. There's increased property value because there's increased assessed value because homes are selling for more money than what they used to. There are issues of other taxing districts and how they are collecting their taxes and what their taxing rates may be. And it is if I could say one thing out of this part of the conversation, there is not a direct correlation between a 1% increase in the city of Tumwater's tax levy and your property tax bill. The increase in your property tax bill from one year to the next is going to be based on a whole series of factors, one very small portion of which is whether or not the city of Tumwater takes 1% of its previous year's levy or 3% of its previous year's levy. Because in the example that I gave, the $10 million.
We'll put simply, it's the property owner being assessed more and paying more. That's it. That is bottom line. However you distribute that does not make a difference. That is an administrative function. If I pay $6,000 this year and I'm paying $7,000 this year, it has gone up. It's 1 plus 1 is 2. It's not going to be minus. It's 2. You add up. You're not taking anything away from me. I rest my case.
So a few years ago, I can't remember when, we had the county treasurer come and do a presentation on property taxes. I think we need another class on property taxes by a county treasurer because I think it was very good. So that might be something we might want to look into.
I think you need to bring a math teacher. You need to bring a math teacher from the community college to come and give a presentation to City Hall to tell them, and put simply, what they're paying and what that money is going towards. I think that will help us all, because if I bring an auditor, an accountant, all they're doing is just telling me how that money is being distributed, your assessed value. asset value don't mean a thing. The bottom line,
As-
it increases. It
Yes.
increases. It does not
The-
decrease.
The tax you pay increases and the assessed value of your home is directly correlated to that new increase.
Thank you.
Customers for that.
Thank
So
you.
one thing I learned from my mom, is that, we don't look at our cards, the postcards that we get twice a year from the county treasurer or the audit. And so, that might be a good exercise. I like what Debbie said as far as, looking at that again. Because what my big takeaway one time was about how much we pay to the library. And, it's been in my head ever since then. I don't buy books because I get books from my library because we pay, significant, not significant, but we support our library. And so that's one way, we pay good taxes to the library. So get your books from the library. But I think people would be really, really surprised to see, like, how much do we pay in taxes to the school district and different things where, I mean, city of Tumwater is really kind of small compared to where everything else
Exactly.
goes. And so
Yeah.
I think that might be a good exercise just to show people where where taxes really do
Yeah.
go. So.
Yeah, and we can definitely do that. And I do agree with you, Peter, that the individual person's property taxes is higher. And I guess what I'm saying to you is the city's ability to increase revenue every year is limited to 1% of what we had last year. And there is not a single thing that we do that goes up by a single 1% every year. And so a fundamental significant portion of our budget is limited in growth. And so over the last 20 to 25 years that this has been in place, it has eaten away at our capacity to be able to fund the basic functions of local government. Our health insurance rates, well, I can't remember, Troy, do you have we just got a notice about what our AWC trust benefit trust increase is going to be starting in 2026. And it's way more than 1%. So what we now have to pay for every single employee's health insurance is going up by way more than 1%. And so that's what the 1% tax cap does for local governments. I'm not making light of the fact that individual people's property tax payment goes up. I pay property taxes in Thurston County. Mine goes up every year, almost, not always, as well. But the reality is the city of Tumwater is going to continue to have financial challenges if we're only able to raise our property tax levy by 1% every year.
And I might just add our portion of the property tax by 1% a year, because it sounds like raising all the property tax by 1% is just our portion.
Yeah. So Michael, you have something?
I actually have to hop off for another call, but I wanted to thank everyone for the great discussion and also apologize for having to go early to my next call for work. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We just wanted to have a conversation. So unless there's some other comments specifically about the baseline financial projection or the baseline assessment from Morgan, especially anything that you think would help us in terms of having a conversation with the full council, that would be helpful.
Any other questions?
I'll just add, if you think of something later, a question you have, or if you think another one of your peers might have a question, you can always give us a call or email that to us, and that'll just help us be more prepared for next time. So thank you.
All right, that's all I have, Mayor.
Great, okay, so, I know all of us have to get back to other things, so we do not have any more additional items on the agenda. So with that, we are adjourned, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Thank you.